I will start. So, got it? Okay. So, hello everyone. Today we have traditional open research seminars. That is a kind of an incentive event before our annual research conference that will be held jointly by NBU and NBP. And this time we will host our conference in Krakow, just a kind of reminder. So Sasha, Farina is somewhere in middle way to Krakow. Possibly he will join us a little better. So, but this means that I will introduce our speakers. So today we welcome our good friends and great researchers, Tho Pham and Oleksandr Talavera. They constantly support numerous research events organized by the National Bank of Ukraine. Our speakers are well known to those who follow our research events. Still, I would like to introduce them. Tho Pham is a senior lecturer that represents the Department of Economics and Relations Studies of the University of York. We know Tho as a gifted researcher that always comes up with great research ideas for testing. She has already participated in many research projects initiated by or those that carried out in the NBU. Tho contributes a lot as a referee for the NBU research products like working papers, discussion papers, or other articles, research papers, so on. We are grateful for this part of your professional activity. And I'd like to note that Tho's research interest includes applied economics with a special focus on financial economics and data science. Sasha is her co-author. Sasha Oleksandr Talavera is a professor of financial economics at the Department of Economics in Birmingham School Economics, and also in Birmingham's Business School and the University of Birmingham. So I also like to mention that Sasha participated in the NBU Visiting Research Program, and he is also an editor of the Rynok of the National Bank of Ukraine. In his research, Sasha deals with empirical corporate finance, banking, and he also likes big data analytics and devoted many of his projects to research in emerging market economies. Tho and Sasha will present the results of their joint research, and this research was carried out together with Suang Chen Wu. So I hope that I pronounced the name of the co-author correctly. So today, Tho and Sasha will talk on the changes in labor markets in Ukraine and Poland, and those changes that was caused by war. Specifically, they use data on online job advertisement to investigate the various effects of forced migration on the labor markets in the Ukraine and Poland. Without any doubt, the topic of extreme interest for us. I mean, not only researchers who are curious by nature, but also I think that this topic and this research study will be interesting for our policy units, policy departments, for policymakers, for every one of us. So let's move to the presentation itself. So.
Right. Thanks a lot, Anthony.
The floor is yours, or screen is yours. You can start.
Right. Thanks, Anthony. Hi, everyone. I'm Tho, and today I will present, as Anthony said, the paper that have been accepted and published in the Journal of Comparative Economics entitled Labor Markets During Wartime, Using Evidence from Online Job Adverts. And well, as you can see, and as Andrea already mentioned, did a joint work with Starsha and Changchen, and both of them are in the Zoom call today. So if you have any questions, please direct all those questions to Starsha and Changchen. Right. So let me start with telling you why we started working on this paper. Well, I'm sure that you are very aware of the fact that over the last 10-15 years, there has been a crisis in terms of refugees around the world. So as estimated by the UN, by the end of 2022, worldwide, there is about more than 108 million people that was displaced, possibly displaced, like driven away from their house, from their home countries because of conflict, of wars and natural disasters. And when we talk about forcibly displacement people, that include both refugees and internally displaced people. And of course, these statistics of number of refugees around the world has been gone up in 2022 because of the Russia's invasion of Ukraine in February, started in February 2022. If we look at the numbers for Ukrainian refugee crisis, again, according to the UN Refugee Agency, that this number was published earlier this year in 2023, they estimated that there are about 6 million people have been internally displaced, and more than 8 million people, mostly children and women, have crossed into the neighboring countries because of the war. And obviously, Poland is one of the, let's say, neighboring countries that receive most of these refugees from Ukraine. And again, as estimated, Poland has hosted nearly 60% of all refugees from Ukraine. Now, we know that with the refugee crisis, where people was driven away from the house, moved to the new country, there are a lot of barriers when it comes to employment opportunities, access to schooling for children. There are a lot of concerns about gender-based violence and human trafficking and so on and so forth. So there are a lot of challenges that refugees have to face when they are put in this difficult situation. So in terms of economic literature, there have been a lot of studies looking at particularly the employment opportunities or the labor market outcomes of refugees when they have to escape from the war, enter the new countries, and try to look for the new job in the new countries. However, if we look at the, I would say, kind of large literatures on this, war, refugees, and the labor market impact, we see a lot of mixed results. On the one hand, the influx of refugees into the receiving countries can have even the positive impact on the labor markets of the host countries, in the sense that with the influx of people, then there will be the creation of new jobs. There will be also an increase in demand for local goods, which of course will have the positive spillover into the production of local firms and so on. And there have been also studies showing that if the refugees have a very high skills and or complementary skills, then that would be good for the local labor markets, because that will be the kind of complementing and transferring skills from the refugees into the local labor markets and help to improve the productivity of the local labor markets. On the other hand, of course, there will be also concerns about when we have a lot of refugees, coming into one particular area of the host countries, then there will be an increase in the competition for available jobs. And with the increase in competition and there is limited demand for new labors, then of course there will be a decrease in the wages in some occupations where there is a particularly high competition. And another chance of researchers looking at the impact of war and refugees on the labor market is to look at the impact of the war and the influx of refugees on the labor market of the countries where the war or the conflict happened. And the existing study have shown that war would have a very long-lasting effects on the economic activity choices, such as the redistribution of the native population across occupations and so on and so forth. And if we look at the impact from the other side, where we have a look at, well, so what would be the impact of war on the standing countries' labor markets? We can see that because of the war and the conflict, then there, of course, there will be the deconstructions happening across across occupations and across industries in the standing countries. And of course, that will lead to the reduction in job opportunities for people who was not able to move out the countries because of the conflict. And with the ongoing war, it could lead to a serious problem of human capital deficit that could, first of all, have immediate impact on firms that was losing workers because of the war. And a longer term impact could be the long-lasting effects on the labor markets in general because of the human capital deficit. So in the post-war period, it could be very difficult for the standing countries where the conflict or the war happened to recover from the war and rebuild their economy. However, if we have a look at the data that have been used in these existing literature, we can see that most of the existing studies are mostly based on the post-war data. So they look at the impact of, let's say, World War II on different labor markets, like in Germany, for example. And the effects are highly context specific because it depends on a lot of factors. For example, the pre-war integrations of migrants into the local labor markets, whether there was any kind of similarities between the host countries and the standing countries, and so on. All of these things could have an impact on the kind of what could be the consequence of refugees on the host country and standing countries' labor markets. So with that in mind, what we want to do in the paper is we want to take a look at these questions about what would be the impact of wars and refugees on the local labor markets of the host countries and the standing countries using a very different source of data. And as you might see from the title, in this study, we use online vacancy data to examine the impacts of the Russia's invasion of Ukraine on two things. The first thing is on the job opportunities for Ukrainian workers to work in Poland. So we consider these kind of job opportunities as the job for migrants and the job opportunities also to work in Ukraine. And in the paper or in this presentation, I will refer to these kind of job opportunities as jobs for stayers. And the second thing that we also want to look at is, so what is the, let's say, short-term or immediate impacts of the Russian invasion of Ukraine on the wages that was offered to both migrants and stayers, and whether there is any changes, whether there is any difference in terms of wage offers to the two groups of workers. So in terms of data, I want to mention that I think Julia from Jubilee, where we get our data from, is also on the Zoom. So if you have any questions about Jubilee website or Jubilee data, you can send your questions to her as well. So the data, we are referring to Jubilee Ukraine and Julia in particular because we got data from them. The idea of Jubilee is job kind of job board website, but it is the vacancies posted on the website was sourced from Ukrainian domain. So for example, if the Kyiv School of Economics posted an advert for lecturer in economics, for example, on their website. Then that advert for lecturer in economics from the Kyiv School of Economics website will be spread and posted on Jubilee website as well. So because the vacancies are sought from Ukrainian domains, so then the job ads posted on this Jubilee website could be considered as the jobs posted by both Ukrainian and international employers, and that target Ukrainian workers, or more broadly, you can think about it, those adverts are to target the job seekers in Ukraine. Here I show you a snapshot of the Jubilee website, just to see like how it works in practice. So if you go on the Jubilee website, you can see that there are a lot of vacancies that were already aggregated and grouped based on location. So we hear about 7,500 jobs that were posted to work in Kyiv. I think here is, well, with my limited knowledge of Ukrainian, I think this is for jobs to work in Poland. This is to work in Warsaw, Poland as well. And as you can see, if we sum up the total number of job adverts to work in Poland in general and to work in Warsaw, it is probably the same as the number of job adverts available for workers who work in Kyiv. So like I already said, the vacancies are sought from different Ukrainian domains and are aggregated and checked for duplications. So to the best of our knowledge, the duplicate vacancies are removed from Jubilee website and removed from Jubilee databases. If you click on any kind of categories that are available on Jubilee website, so here I click on own adverts that was available to work in Kyiv, that's what you're gonna see. You can see kind of summary of the job ads here. Here, there's a summary of two. You can see on the left-hand side different criteria if you want to restrict the search criteria further, like in terms of what is the salary offered, mode of work, like part-time, full-time, and so on and so forth. And if we click on a particular vacancy, these are the information that you can see. You can see what is the job title, if the job has, or if the employer stated their offer wages, that's what we're going to see here as well. This is the minimum and this is the maximum wage offered by the employer in this particular vacancy. We can see where is the job located. So that is the location of the job, and using this information about the location of the job, we could be able to differentiate whether the jobs was offered to Ukrainian workers to work in Ukraine or to work in other countries. And in our study, we focus on the job ads that were posted to work in Ukraine versus to work in Poland. And of course, in the data, we also observe other information. And the most important thing that we can observe here is the job description, where, well, we can see if there are any kind of particular skills or extra soft skills that the employers demand from their workers. So in total, in our sample, we use the data starting from January 2021 and ended our sample in November 2022. So over this almost 2 years period, we have more than 5.4 million ads to analyze and use in our analysis. Right. So, well, obviously the scale of our data is very large, but it doesn't come with any, like, it is not the perfect data. We are aware of several drawbacks of online vacancies in general, not just with Jubilee data, that we know that our data are not the representative of the whole labor market, because the data, of course, do not cover all sectors or all industries. Also, the data do not cover the government or civil service jobs. So we are aware of these limitations when we analyze our data. We are also aware that our data do not cover the Polish jobs targeting Ukrainian workers that were posted on Polish domains, because bearing in mind our data was sourced from Jubilee Ukraine, so the vacancies were only sourced from Ukrainian domains. And even though we have a lot of vacancies in our data, but almost 50% of the vacancies did not explicitly state the offer wage. So again, this is something that we have to bear in mind when we talk about the impact of wars on offer wages later. But with all those limitations in mind, we still believe that our data can offer a lot of advantages, especially in the current situation where it is very difficult for Ukrainian statistics office to collect official data, because our data is high frequency. It is real-time updated. So, and even though it is not the representative of the whole labor market, but it is representative of online vacancies in Ukraine, just because of the way it was aggregated and sourced from different domains. So overall, we think that our data will be very useful for us to look at what would be the immediate impact of the ongoing war on the labor markets in Ukraine and labor markets for Ukrainian workers who work in other countries, given that the labor market data during wartime is very difficult to be collected. Well, if there are any questions, then I'm happy to take questions along with my talk. Right, so just to give you an overview of how the number of vacancies in our data look like, here we separated the number of vacancies by jobs in Ukraine versus job in Poland. So job in Ukraine is in the gray bars, and jobs in Poland are those in the black bars. And as expected, we see a huge jump in the number of vacancies to work in Poland between April 2022 and until June, July 2022, so a few months after the onset of the full-scale invasion. If we take a closer look, thus in Ukraine, just to see what happened with the number of vacancies available for workers who work in Ukraine 90 days before 24th February 2022 and 90 days after that, then immediately we can see that it is reflected, the timeline of the war was already reflected in the number of vacancies available on Jubilee website, that immediately 90 days after the war, there was a huge drop in the number of vacancy available in the eastern part of Ukraine that was heavily affected by the war. In the study, we have to do a lot of data cleanings and data extractions to be able to get a very clean data set to work with in terms of numerical analysis. So the first step that we did was to clean the job titles, because as you can see in some of the screenshots that I showed you earlier, even though we have very detailed data of the online atlas, most of our text data are unstructured, especially in terms of job titles. So what we did was we normalized our job titles in the sense that we grouped the job titles that were similar, that refer to the similar narrowly defined occupations into one group. And with that process, we are able to get 467 normalized job titles, or you can think about it as the narrowly defined job occupations, of which 275 titles appear both before and after 24 February 2022, which you can think about as continuing job titles. 41 titles only appear in the pre-war period, which we refer to as the exit titles, that these jobs no longer exist after the onset of the full-scale invasion. And surprisingly, there are 148 job titles that are new to the data, meaning that these job titles only appear or only enter the sample after February 2022. And these titles in the paper we refer to as enter titles. The next step that we also do with the job titles is we try to match the normalized job titles with the closest job titles in the ONET, which is the kind of job title classification database in the US for classification later. And when we say job titles classification, there are two things that we want to do with this matching of our job titles with the ONET job titles. The first one is to define the level of skills demanded for a particular job based on the ONET job zone indicator. So in our data, we have three different groups of job titles. The first one is what we refer to job titles or job occupations that demand no skills, which is equivalent to the job zone that indicate little or no preparation needed in the ONET job zone indicator. The second group is the job titles that demand some skills, which is equivalent to the ONET job zone that demands some preparation for the job. And any other jobs that demand either medium, considerable, or extensive preparation for the job, we refer to them in our data as the jobs that demand medium or high skills. The second thing that we did with the job titles classification is to use the ONET work context data to classify jobs into female versus male oriented. The job is defined as male oriented if the category for spend time climbing ladders, poles, or spend time using your hands to handle, control thin objects, tools, or controls of at least 80 out of 100 in terms of the scale. These jobs are considered males oriented. And if the job demand the workers to have a lot of contact with others, either it is contact with customers or contact with other workers, then we define these jobs as the female oriented. And in this figure, I just want to show you what is the kind of distribution of jobs by skills and gender segregation in our data over time. In terms of the skills level, we can see that after February 2022, there is an increase in the number of jobs in the middle and high skills as compared to the pre-war period or pre-full-scale invasion period. If we look at the distribution by gender, we don't really, well, we do see there is a drop in the number of female-oriented since August 2022. And later on, we will show you what was the reason for this drop and where exactly this drop coming from. But I can give you a hint that is actually the drop in the number of female-oriented jobs available for workers to work in Ukraine.
Oh, I have two questions here.
Yeah.
Do you have maybe a split by country of these charts? So are there notable differences between what's posted in Poland versus what's posted in Ukraine?
So we don't have the figures we don't repeat these figures for jobs in Poland and jobs in Ukraine, but we do it in our empirical analysis later.
Okay. And is there a particular reason why you assign a gender? Because I would actually see the more like service versus manufacturing if you want. And I think both men and women can work in both. It's where you try to match afterwards to the type of migration.
Right. So for these kind of female versus male oriented classification, I could have put some references here, but we just follow the literature. That's how they did. In the literature where they argue that the gender sorting into different occupations, not because of the job title per se, but it is about the work context, whether the context of the work is more suitable for, or traditionally suitable for men or women.
Okay, thanks. Yeah.
Right. And the next thing that we also did with our data was to extract extra skills requirement from the job description. So I will not bother you with exactly what we did. If you're interested, I can show you at the end. But basically what we did here, we performed some sort of text analysis to generate the requirement keywords from the description. And we are able to extract the keywords related to like language skills stream. When the employers say we demand our workers to know English or German or Polish, for example. We are also able to extract the keywords related to teamwork skills, analytical skills, communication skills, and also when the employers require their workers to have certain years of experience or certain experience in the job, for example. So in total, more than 1/3 of the asks in our data do require candidates to be fluent in foreign languages. And when I say foreign languages, it could be Russian, it could be Polish, English, and German. About 15% of asks in our data request candidates to have very good communication skills. But then only less than 10% of the asks actually request the candidates to have like good teamwork skills, be good at analyticals, or have some experience. Actually, many asks did say that we don't require our candidates to have any experience at all. Right, so let's move on to the empirical specification. What we did first is we want to look at what would be the changes in the number of asks available to Ukrainian workers to work in Ukraine versus work in Poland before and after February 2022. So to do so, we aggregate our data to the job titles in location in a month level. So our left-hand side will be the number of asks for job title I in location J in a particular month in our data. And on the right-hand side is a series of dummy variables indicating whether month T is month 0 since February 2022 or month 1, 2, 3 of, well, actually we look at 6 months before and 9 months after February 2022. And our base category here will be the January 2021 until July 2021 period. And in the specification, we also, yeah.
May I ask you?
Yeah.
Did you distinguish between refugees and those workers from Ukraine who posted before the war? No? Because in 2021,
yeah,
before the war started, yeah, the new wave of war started, yeah, many of Ukrainian workers could use the opportunity to post advertisement and to find a job abroad. So can we distinguish these two categories of migrants?
Right. So, well, your question is about, let's say, economic migrants versus forced migrants, right? So economic ones are the ones who purposely, let's say, go to Poland because of better job opportunities.
Yes, yes.
So
those seekers for better opportunities or forced migration, migrants.
Yes, so that's why we have a series of time dummies, because what we argue here is that before February 2022, there was already a lot of Ukrainian workers looking for a job in Poland, but those workers are economic migrants because they look for better job, better pay and better opportunities in Poland. So they are, or most of them was economic migrants, whereas after February 2022, because of the full-scale invasion, then Ukrainian workers who stayed for a job in Poland would be considered most of them would be considered forced migrants, that they had no choice but to relocate to Poland and look for a job there. If that makes sense. And if there is any difference between these two groups of migrants, then we could see the difference in the estimated coefficient for our time dummies, because we have the war dummies here. And we have H1 dummy for 6 months before February 2022 and 9 months after February 2022. Right. Well, I hope you can see the little table that I have here, but the idea is our variable of interest here will be the estimated coefficient for the war time dummy and the interaction between war time dummy and the location. So Ukraine, the dummy variable Ukraine equals to 1 if the job was to work in Ukraine, and 0 if it was to work in Poland. And that is the results that I showed you here. On the top row, I showed you each column is for 6 months before February 2022 until 9 months after February 2022. The estimated coefficient for the war dummy itself would indicate what is the change in the number of job vacancies available for Ukrainian workers to work in Poland, seen from 9 months before February 2022 until 9 months after February 2022, compared to the January 2021 and January 2021, July 2021 period. And the interaction term would indicate what would be the change in the number of job vacancies available to Ukrainian workers to work in Ukraine, again, for the same period. So what we can see from this table is that on average, the number of Polish jobs, so the jobs for Ukrainian workers to work in Poland, advertised during the 6-month period leading up to February 2022 is around 1.5 times greater than the number of adverts that was observed in the pre-August 2021 period. And if we look at the number of Polish jobs in the post-February 2022 period, then we can see that there is a huge jump in month 4 and month 5 since February 2022. So that is in June and July 2022, where the number of Polish jobs was around 10 times higher than what was available in the January until July 21 period. To make it clearer, how exactly is this translated, if we look at the predicted number of us in Ukraine versus in Poland over our examined period, then we can have a look at this figure. Here, we have 2 lines on the left-hand side here. The first line is the number of predicted ads for each month since February 2022 for jobs in Poland, and which is indicated in the dashed line. And the solid line is number of predicted ads for Ukrainian workers to work in Ukraine between the -6 plus 9 months period since February 2022. And as you can see, we don't really see any considerable difference in the total number of ads in Ukraine before versus after February 2022. Now, we do not claim that the labor markets in Ukraine is not affected by the war, because again, we have the number of ads, which could simply mean that some firms that still exist and that still operated after the war, after the onset of the war, they lost workers because their workers migrated to other countries or might enter the army. So then they need to look for the new workers to work in the existing jobs. So there is no change or no considerable change in the number of predicted ads before and after February 2022, just simply imply that there is still some demands for workers to work in Ukraine even during the war, but it doesn't mean that the new jobs are created after the war.
So I have two clarification questions here, if possible. The regression you showed us before, you're regressing the year-on-year changes.
This one.
Yeah.
So on the left-hand side, we have the number of ads based on location and occupations for each month.
For each month, okay. Because normally there's quite a lot of seasonality, and Ukrainian workers go into construction, go into agriculture, and that's normally very, very much reflected also in the Ukrainian platforms. You see many more ads showing up prior to the start of work in those particular industries. So this would be actually quite useful to check if this maybe might these are the fixed effects?
Yes, we control for different kind of
time fixed effect. Okay. The other thing I wanted to ask you, the number of jobs might actually have quite a lot to do with the let's call it sub market situation in that particular industry. So you might have some particular industries that lack structurally workers and some other industries where that's not necessarily the case. Do you run this by industry? So can you check, for example, if these if there's some, let's say there's some persistent structural differences across the different labor markets of Poland?
So we don't run this estimation by industry per se, but we do control for the let's say occupation fixed effect.
Okay. And the last bit is just a comment. I mean, if we look at the OLX, and if we look at the what's the name of the other one that we use, Andriy? There's two platforms in Ukraine that post jobs, and both of them actually have decreases in posted jobs and posted CVs in March, April. So actually the drop is quite significant, both in jobs. So people post a CV, and after 1 month, if you don't refresh it, it just expires in a sense. Many people did not renew this, meaning they were already looking forward and knowing they're not going to be looking for a job in Ukraine. So that tells us about the supply. And then the demand of labor saw pretty much the same story, because many ads were not there, I mean, in absolute terms. So there was an absolute decrease compared to, February 21 or February 2020.
Yes, so I had experience to work with OLX data before, and to the best of my knowledge, OLX is, well, you can think about like kind of Indeed, where employers actually, or firms actually go to OLX website, register as employers and post the adverts there. Whereas, so it is considered like only one job board, whereas Jubilee data is sought from many of these platforms like that. So to some extent, our data would cover much more online vacancies available in Ukraine compared to OLX platform, just because of the way how data was aggregated, collected and aggregated in Jubilee data. So yeah, that's
okay. Yeah, thanks. And do you have anything about salaries by chance?
We do. Well, about 1/2 of our data have information on salaries, and that's what we're going to use in the later part of our analysis.
Okay, thanks. Yeah.
Let me ask one more quick question, additional question, just to clarify. As we see, we can observe the search, two-stage search, yeah? So, to search in demand, yeah?
Yeah.
Job demand. So, could it be attributed to some improvements on the site? I suspect that developers should have made some improvements reacting to the war. So in such way, whether our estimates can be overestimated, whether we can compare the results of, I don't know, May with the results of the previous year or previous periods.
But
Because the opportunity to the possibility to post and possibility to access this data became better with time. So while the developers were adjusting to the situation, so it can be considered at the part of structural break, I think so, because we have two different sides. Maybe I'm not sure. Whether my question is whether you check this, because if you have two different sides and the information from different sides, that it should be controlled somehow. I don't know how, but
you mean
I have this question.
two different platforms, you mean? You mean data from two different platforms?
Yes, from two different platforms. They, I suspect that they improved some features of their advertisement platform, and it made some changes that could affect the results, obtained results, and collected data.
Right, so I can tell you these two things, and if I miss something, then Julia, well, in the call sheet can always unmute and give extra comments from Jubilee's side. But Jubilee aggregated data from, as I say, many domains in Ukraine, not only one or two, and they did check for duplication and remove duplicated ads. So whatever ads were posted on Jubilee website and that was made available to us for doing research, it was, let's say, unique adverts to avoid these kind of overestimated situations. And I would say the coverage of Ukraine, Jubilee Ukraine is much better than the coverage of Jubilee in other countries, because actually Julia is also kind enough to provide us with Jubilee Poland. So kind of similar idea, but was posted on the Jubilee.pl domain. And the coverage of Jubilee Poland was not as good as the coverage of Jubilee Ukraine. And I think that was the reason that you mentioned, because Jubilee Poland took some time for them to develop the algorithm, to aggregate data, and so on. So the coverage of Jubilee Poland was not as good as the coverage of Jubilee Ukraine. Right. What I was about to say. Right. So, well, there are reasons we can think of to explain why we don't really see the huge drop in the number of vacancies as one would expect, and as you show when you use data from one platform, like you mentioned in your paper. Well, one of the reasons could be because, like I already said, there are firms that still operate during the war, and those firms might have lost their workers because of forced migrants. So then with workers leaving the firms, it would leave the existing jobs vacant. And as a result, firms have to look for the new worker to work in exactly the same job. So like I said, it doesn't mean that there are new jobs available. It's just that the existing jobs are becoming vacant. And is shown in different surveys by the official statistics is that although businesses had to cease the operations completely at the beginning of the war, but the situation slowly improved as the war continued. And many firms, especially the small and medium firms in Ukraine, has relocated within Ukraine, especially to the parts that share borders with Eastern Europe. And that could explain why we observe a even slightly increase in the number of job asks between that was July until September 2022 in the regions of Ukraine that share border with Eastern Ukraine. That share border with Eastern Europe. Now, if we look at the predicted number of asks in Poland, then you can see that immediately in month +2 +3 since February 2022, we see an increase in the number of predicted asks for Ukrainian workers who work in Poland, which is estimated based our estimation is about 350 to 400 job asks in April and May 2022. And that statistics increased to around 800 to 850 asks per month in June and July 2022. However, since August 2022, we see that the number of Polish jobs available for Ukrainian workers had decreased to around 150 to 200 jobs a month, so much lower than the number of job asks available in June, July. But then, even though the number of job asks available for Ukrainian workers who work in Poland decreased since August 2022, it is still slightly higher than what was available in the pre-war period. Now, moving on to the next part of the analysis, we want to look at whether there is any differences in these number of job asks available for Ukrainian workers who work in Poland versus who work in Ukraine, based on the level of job skills and gender segregation within the occupation. So to do so, we interacted our war dummies with the location dummies of Ukraine versus Poland, and again get to the triple interaction where we interacted those two dummies with the dummies indicating the job skills and whether the job is female versus male oriented job as well, and get the predicted numbers of job asks by skills, by occupation, by location in each month in our sample. And what we observe here is that there is an increase in the number of jobs available for Ukrainian workers who work in Poland after the war, regardless of the skills level of the jobs, but the highest increase was for the jobs that demand medium or high skills level, followed by the occupation that requires some skills, and the increase was lowest for the no skills job. If we look at the similar statistics, but this time by gender segregation within occupations, then we can see that the largest increase in the number of job asks were actually for the occupations that were traditionally viewed as the female-oriented, and followed by the undefined or gender neutral, as we call it in the paper, and the lowest increase was for the male-oriented jobs, which reflects the fact that most of Ukrainian refugees who crossed the border from Ukraine to Poland was women and children. As a result, we observed this huge increase in the number of job asks that could target females. So what can we read into these kind of results? We can say that the increase in the number of higher skills jobs and the female-dominated jobs could help mitigate some barriers or some concerns about whether or not Ukrainian refugees can integrate into the local labor market, because of the fact that the skills mismatch, because there was concerns at the beginning of the war that most of the Ukrainian refugees have very high skill set, and the jobs available for them would be lower skill set, would require lower skill set. So if high-skilled Ukrainian workers have to work in the low-skilled jobs, then over time, it could lead to the human capital deficit that could make them, and that could make it difficult for high-skilled Ukrainian workers to get the high-paid, high-level jobs later on during their kind of integration into the local labor market. And of course, at the beginning of the war, there were also concerns about the female labor force participation into the Polish labor market because of the fact that most of the Ukrainian refugees were women. So then with our results, we can say that, well, the concerns about whether or not the concerns about female refugees might not have the suitable skills or for the male-dominated jobs, or they are simply discouraged to apply, might be mitigated because there was this huge increase in the number of female-dominated jobs available for them to apply for. But we have to bear in mind that what we observe in this increase in the number of higher skills jobs and female-dominated jobs was very short-lived. It was only a few months after February 2022, and then reduced over time. The next thing that we also did in the paper was we tried to look at whether or not there was any change in the demand for, let's say, HR skills, posted by looking at the share of job asks within each occupation in each month that demand for language skills, soft skills, the analytical skills, and so on. All of these HR skills requirements that we can identify from the job descriptions. And what we see is that although the Polish employers, or at least the firms that posted jobs for different workers to work in Poland, do not lower their demands for language, communications, analytical, or teamwork skills. They do not increase the demand for such skills neither, as shown by this kind of more or less flat estimate that we see in the post-February 2022 period. However, for the jobs that was to look for Ukrainian workers to work in Ukraine, we actually observed an increase in the share of us requiring these soft and analytical skills, as shown in our predicted shares here in the post-February 2022 period. I will tell you a little bit more about how we can read into these results for demand for skills in the later slide, but for the interest of time, I will move on and tell you a little bit about what we did with the wage information. So bearing in mind, we don't have the complete wage information in our data because not all of the us have the information on wages. Actually, only 37%, almost 37% of us in our data have stated the minimum wages that they offer to the candidate or to the workers. So what we did was we used whatever art that we can observe the minimum wage information and do some cleaning that many of the jobs that have wages listed in USD or euros, we converted them into UAH, the local rates. We also assume that the wage rate is converted into the hourly rate by assuming 8 working hours per day and 5 working days per week, because many of the wages in our data are annual or monthly wage, and we want to get a consistent wage rate. So that's why we have to do this kind of conversion. We also deflate our nominal wages to the real wages and trimmed our wage data at the first and 99 percentiles to remove outliers. And after doing that, what we did was we regressed on the left-hand side is the minimum wage offered in each art that we can observe in the data on a series of time dummies or word dummies, as well as the interaction between the word dummies and the job heterogeneity when we talk about job heterogeneity, it is with the job skills that we identified earlier or the gender segregation within the occupation, again, as we identified earlier. And this is what we have in terms of the predicted lock-up wage that we get out from our estimation. We can see that since February 2022, there is a significant drop in the minimum wage offered to Ukrainian workers, both in Ukraine and in Poland. And if we compare the scale of the drop, it seems like the decrease in the offered wage is higher for jobs in Ukraine versus for the job in Poland. And it is consistent across skills level, across the female versus male-oriented jobs. One might have concern about the fact, as I showed you earlier, that some of the occupations in our data are exiting the period after February, exiting the sample after February 2022. Some are new jobs that only appear after February 2022. So to address that concern, we also repeat our analysis for wage on the continuing jobs, that are the jobs or the narrowly defined occupations that appear in our sample both before and after February 2022. And we still get a very similar figures in terms of predicted lock-up wage. So what we can read into these results is that, and it's back to Andrew's point earlier about economic versus forced migrants, that before February 2022, most Ukrainian migrants to Poland can be considered economic migrants because they move to opportunities. While after February 2022, Ukrainian migrants to Poland are mostly refugees or forced migrants. They move because of the war. So what we can say from our estimates is that related to the Ukrainian economic migrants before the full-scale war begins, so before February 2022, Ukrainian refugees are offered low-paid jobs and or the low wages for similar jobs, as indicated by our estimates earlier. So the main takeaways that we can get from our analysis is that despite the immediate access to employment opportunities that could facilitate integrations of Ukrainian refugees in Poland, more needs to be done to improve the Ukrainian refugees labor market outcomes in Poland, because as we show, the impact was very short-lived. And we also find the suggestive evidence based on the share of the job ads that demand extra skills that we can identify in the data that could be considered as a suggestive evidence that the skill set needed in the post-war economy might be very different from what was required in the pre-war period, because we observe this increase in the skill set demanded by the Ukrainian employers for workers who work in Ukraine. So that would indicate that for reconstruction of the Ukrainian economy in the post-war period, it would require the up-to-date tracking of skills demands. And it seems like, given the situation, the online vacancies will be a suitable data source for this task, so that the official statistics office can check what would be the up-to-date skills demands and have some policy response for these changes in skill demands in the post-war period. So I think I run out of time, so I can stop here, and if you have any other questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Okay, any questions? Okay, Starsha Talavera commented in the chat.
Just I left contacts of Julia in chat in case you are interested to know more, you know, like kind of request additional information. Yeah.
I have one more question on the data, if you can answer. Just I'm wondering whether the employers have can revise their advertisement. Can you check for this? For this adopting behavior. So could they change some important features in their advertisements, like the wage or other conditions of work and so on, and whether they use such possibility during the whole period of observation.
So
if you don't know this, I can request to the Yulia. So, but it's really interesting. Maybe I missed when you explained this. But
no. So I didn't mention anything about this. But yes, of course. Let's say if the firms posted the job ads in OLX website, and that job ad was not filled, meaning that the firm was not able to find a suitable worker, then they can always go again using the similar ads, maybe change some conditions, maybe increase the wages, but still for the same job, and posted it again on OLX website. So that could be reflected in our data, but we don't have any way, as of now, with the data that we have, we don't have any ways to control for this or take this into account in our analysis.
Okay, thank you. Maybe other question for our attendees. So, if I may, I have one more question. Just listen. You stated that you stated a shift in the wage distribution, right? So, and if so, it means that it is possible that regressors in your regression can determine the outcome variables differently at different part of the distribution. At the lower part is considerably can be higher or lower coefficient than for the for the same coefficient at the upper part of the distribution. In this case, don't you see that it would be also available to apply quantile regression? So that's I think, in my opinion, it will you will benefit from this. You will get more information about the situation on the labor market. Just as you can consider this as just like my suggestion or additional opportunity for robustness check or so. So what about quantile regression?
No. So yeah, I totally agree that there could be this decrease in the offer wage could be very different along the distribution of wages, but well, in the paper we didn't want to do anything with quantile regressions because we have a lot of different fixed effects, high dimensional fixed effects in the data in our regressions, and taking into account on these high dimensional fixed effect in quantile regressions is a little bit challenging. So we decided to keep it simple. But yes, certainly in the next paper, well, not for this paper because it's already accepted and published, but maybe for the next paper, that's what we can consider doing.
Thank you. Yeah, good job. Thank you. Really interesting results, and that I think that all this stuff, all the outcomes, all your findings will be definitely very useful for us, for Ukraine. Not only in the current situation, but also in the future, during the close reconstruction. We hope that close, and after our victory. So, dear colleagues, I ask you about your participation. Please don't hesitate to ask your question. Please. Okay.
But by the way, if you have this opportunity, you know,
Yeah.
Thursday, and read,
Thank you.
I knew you're gonna be our chair.
Don't have
today.
another chance, yes, but thank you, Tho, for explaining everything thoroughly. So we do appreciate it, and this great advertisement for your research that will be presented during our conference just in few days. So thank you everyone for attending our seminars. Thank you everyone for the great, thank you Sasha and Tho and your called Wu, yeah, for this research, for the great results. So hope to see you. Unfortunately, only we are in online format, but still we will see you during the conference, and I hope for the great events, for more discussion, more interesting comments, and see you next. See you in the future. Please participate in our events, our research events. Thank you for coming. So